The time period spanning between 1870 to 1910 is referred to as the Gilded Age because America appeared as an industrial powerhouse, but the reality was that the nation was facing an era of corruption.
To begin, one of the most prominent developments during this age was Thomas the Train Engine. Oh wait, just kidding. It was really railroads. Congress advanced these railroad loans with alternating miles of land because of the promise for better mail and military transportation. The first two transcontinental rails were the Union Pacific Railroad, paving westward from Nebraska with Irish workers, and the Central Pacific, laying California through the Sierra Nevadas using Chinese immigrants. These two rails were wedded, making the first transcontinental railroad in Promontory, Utah in 1869, uniting the entire nation all the way to California. Four transcontinental lines that followed were the Northern Pacific, Atkins, Topeka, and Santa Fe, Southern Pacific, and Great Northern.
One man that increased the productivity of railroads was millionaire Cornelius Vanderbilt, who bought out several rail companies in order to connect lines across the country. He introduced standard width gauges so trains could run along all rails, and he used steel rails so they wouldn't disintegrate with the weather. Using steel rails increased thousands of jobs, making the U.S. a steel powerhouse. Also, he introduced the Westinghouse air brake, making it not only quieter, but safer to stop trains by using air instead of metal on metal. Finally, Vanderbilt used double tracks to allow multiple trains to pass each other, and thus, in 1883, 4 time zones were created.
While railroads were crucial to the American economy, they fueled mass corruption, including the Credit Mobilier scandal, in which the Union Pacific Railroad created its own construction company with inflated prices and then bribed congressmen with stocks to avoid being caught. Another financier who worked the economic system was Jay Gould, who for 30 years overstockwatered, which meant he would grossly inflate their claims about railroad assets and sell bonds way above the actual value. In addition to stock watering, these railroad monopolies would pool agreements to share profits amongst a group of businesses and offer secret rebates to shippers for assured traffic.
In 1886, Supreme Court decision in St. Louis and Pacific Railroad Company versus Illinois argued that individual states had no power to regulate interstate commerce. This led to the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887 that outlawed rebates or pools, forced companies to publish their rates openly, and disallow unfair shipper discrimination. They attempted to set up the Interstate Commerce Commission to administer and enforce a new legislation. However, it turned into an organization that peacefully resolved conflict.
For the general population, mass production and assembly lines increased the average number of Americans working for wages. The U.S. had an abundant supply of natural resources of coal, oil, and iron in the Midwest and Great Lakes region. These growing industries of automobiles and steel were popular as Henry Ford established his assembly line for the Model T in 1913, and the steel industry grew with the introduction of the Bessemer process, which was a system of making cheap steel and eliminating impurities, named after a British inventor, although earlier discovered by American William Kelly. Between 1860 and 1890, there were over 440,000 patents, including 1876 with Bell and his telephone, and Edison with a light bulb in 1879.
Many immigrants had come to become accustomed with the harsh 12-hour days of working with little pay. Even a group that had been neglected for so long was granted new economic and social opportunities: women. Because of this working demand, some middle-class women had delayed marriages and smaller families. Although if the family had enough money, it was of higher status to keep the wife at home. I'm Andrew Carnegie, the Steel King. My workers specialize in the Mesabi Range, gathering ore to be sent across the Great Lakes to be turned into steel. I was proud to use vertical integration, which essentially meant that I controlled all phases of my steel manufacturing and there was no middleman.
You must think you're so cool, Mr. Carnegie, but I, John D. Rockefeller, am the founder of horizontal integration, which means that I allied with competitors to monopolize a market. Specifically, I monopolized 95% of all oil refineries in the country, and I was a success from the age of 19. With my large-scale distribution and production, I established the Standard Oil Company in 1870.
Guys, don't forget about me. I am JP Morgan, and I am the banker's banker because I finance railroads and other corporations, especially during economic panics. I fought with Carnegie over controlling the railroads, so I bought him out for over $400 million. Yes, I know I'm rich. I expanded my industrial empire by launching the United States Steel Corporation in 1901, and it was America's first multi-billion-dollar corporation at $1.4 billion. When you think about Darwinism, you immediately imagine Charles Darwin and the discovery of evolution on the Galapagos Islands, right? Well, in 1880, Herbert Spencer and William Graham Sumner coined the term social Darwinism as a way of explaining that natural selection worked on humans as it came down to survival of the fittest. These two men believed that individuals won success in life by competing with their natural rights, and that poor people were just lazy and lacking motivation. Some elites justified their actions through the gospel of wealth, which meant that everyone had a God law-driven duty to become rich, even though monopolists used expensive lawyers to gain control in their state legislators, and they even manipulated clauses in the 14th Amendment because they were all given equal protection under the law. In fact, companies incorporated themselves in less restrictive states like New Jersey, Delaware, and Kentucky, so they wouldn't be as harshly persecuted for their corruption. The government attempted to take control of these monopolies with the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, forbidding combinations to restrain trade. However, this backfired because the entirety of the act was reversed into punishing labor unions due to them blocking trade. Ironically, the wording was so vague that the Supreme Court ruled that act only applied in commerce and not in manufacturing, with their 1895 decision, United States versus E.C. Knight.
In the southern states, industrialization wasn't as popular despite attempts to become Georgia Yankees, because the North designed regional rates within industries like steel with Pittsburgh Plus to keep the South as a supplier of raw materials. Therefore, Southerners lived by cheap labor with cotton mills. A new important product for the South that became popular during the Gilded Age was tobacco, when James Buchanan Duke started the American Tobacco Company in 1890, creating a boom of tobacco consumption and later instituting the famous college we know as Duke University.
While jobs were growing across different sections of the nation, laborers found themselves powerless among the powers of industry and corruption. A common effort made by these workers was establishing unions to create strikes in hopes of changing their working lives. However, these typically failed as corporations had the power to quickly stop strikes when they occurred, calling upon court injunctions and the federal military. The National Labor Union was organized in 1866 to represent workers and advocated for an 8-hour day, but excluded Chinese, women, and blacks. Another union organization was the Knights of Labor, which started as a secret society in 1869, which allowed anyone except for Chinese. They lost support after the Haymarket Square riot in Chicago on May 4, 1886, when a bomb went off, killing 7 police officers, and they became viewed as violent anarchists. Finally, the American Federation of Labor emerged in 1886, led by Samuel Gompers, who sought better wages, hours, and working conditions, using walkouts and boycotts, but it was exclusive to just skilled laborers and white men. From the 1880s to 1900s, 23,000 strikes occurred. However, they only won half, which wasn't enough for workers to triumph over big business.